Well, welcome to chapter 7. And as you can see, we have Maggie back with us, and she has her ball in front of her and is requesting strongly that I play ball with her, but I will refrain from doing that for the time being. But I'm sure as soon as this video is over, one of the two of us is going to be throwing a ball. So, again, welcome to chapter 7. And as I said at the end of the last lecture, we are now ready to wet a line. We're ready to start fishing for candidates. At this point, we should have a decent idea where we're going to look and how we are going to look. And it goes without saying that we know what we're looking for. Remember, our goal is to find the best person or persons possible for our open position or positions. Keep in mind that recruiting is not a volume game, it's a quality game. Think of it this way. Do you want to make your selection from the best of the best or the best of the rest? The untold dirty secret of recruiting may be summed up like this. In external recruiting, the organization is trying to sell itself to potential applicants. So many marketing principles are applied to improve recruiting yields. And interpret yield as quality applicants, not quantity of applicants. It's about marketing. And you know what? It's true from the other side as well. When you are seeking employment, like many of you are doing now, it's all about marketing. It's about standing out from the crowd. It's about making a good impression or good impressions. It's a branding issue. In terms of branding, the authors point out that how applicants perceive your recruiting process becomes a part of your image or brand. Is your process loose or unfair or difficult or considerate? Does your process value applicants? Is your organization, as revealed in the recruiting process, friendly and welcoming? In the eyes of the applicant, how you treat people before they are hired may be a strong indicator of how you would treat them after they are hired. In that sense, let's revert back to the Nestle hiring process for hourly employees mentioned in the lecture in chapter 2. No doubt it was tough. It was extensive and time consuming for the applicants and for the managers. And it certainly impacted our brand in the community. And I'm sure some applicants were put off by the extensive nature and the time involved. But in general, the process was perceived as fair, difficult, and very friendly. Applicants appreciated that a great deal of time was devoted to imparting information about the company to applicants. The word on the street was, if you want to work for Nestle, you got to go through the process. And thousands wanted to work for Nestle, even with the well-known recruiting process. And one more important point. The process demonstrated how much we valued employees and how important they were to our culture. Our employees were very proud to have participated in the process and successfully landed a job. The difficult, extensive process actually enhanced our brand. For those of you who are unsuccessfully searching for a job and who lament that you can't understand why you have no offers because you're doing what everyone else is doing, you may have just identified the problem. You don't stand out. Organizations who only attract mediocre applicants do so because they don't stand out from to the outstanding applicants. And this simple concept is not an oversimplification. It is the basis for hiring good people and for getting good people hired. In terms of this lecture, as it is my practice, I will not restate the points or material covered in the text. However, I have selected a few points that I want to expand, and I will expand with a real-world perspective. In many instances, the text views the world through the lens of a big organization or a major company. Most of you will probably end up working for much smaller organizations. Big companies have people who do nothing but recruiting and selection activities. That's their job. And that job is covered very well in the text. And it makes sense that big organizations would have specialists doing the recruiting if my premise that staffing is one of the most important functions in any organization is true. However, in small organizations, staffing is a part-time endeavor at best. The people involved in staffing have many other primary responsibilities, but staffing activities are no less important in small versus large companies. Such has been my situation through most of my career. How do we fit this vastly important process into our daily work lives and still give it the attention it deserves and demands? The obvious answer is you can't. The workload must be shared within the organization, but we should also consider using professionals outside the organization as well, and using those resources is what this lecture will endeavor to explore further. The manager at times just has more work to do than can be accomplished by the current staff and needs a body to fill an opening. They are more concerned with getting work done short term than the longer term implications of organizational success. This is not a criticism, but a reality. Many managers live in a short term world by definition. They have to. HR and people in the recruiting role must foster and guide that long term organizational perspective. With a clear understanding of what we want, we turn our attention to the methods of marketing our position to attracting candidates. As I said earlier, a critical recognition in terms of how to attract candidates and the methods used centers around the brand of our company and the labor market. There are some companies that have well-known positive brand. The mere mention of a job opening generates hundreds or thousands of resumes, even in a labor market of low unemployment rates. In times of high unemployment, any job opening generates intense interest. In the mid-1970s, I worked for RCA Corporation in the final assembly plant in Bloomington, Indiana. The facility employed about 3,500 unionized hourly production employees. The facility was one of the most dysfunctional organizations I've ever worked in, but they paid well, and unemployment was very high at the time. We were planning to open a new manufacturing unit that would employ about 500 additional people. We did not formally advertise, but let it be known by word of mouth that we would be interviewing on December 30th for the positions. I was astounded when I arrived at work on December 30th. Around 2,000 people were lined up outside the door in temperatures in the 20-plus degree range, awaiting an interview opportunity. When I looked across the street in the parking lot, I spotted several tents set up by hopeful job applicants. They actually spent the night outside in those freezing temperatures waiting for a job. Not a very attractive company, but under the economic conditions of the time, there was very little need for active recruiting. Incidentally, everyone who spent the night in a tent was hired. If our brand is good, we probably don't need much in the way of advertising or outside recruiting help. If our brand is average or poor, we will need to invest in more recruitment resources. Let's say our brand is average. We need to invest a little more effort into letting the available workforce know that we have an open position. How much more? Well, it depends on what kinds of people we want to attract. In times when unemployment is low, in other words, most people are working, we need to spend quite a bit to attract those who may not be readily in the job market. In times when unemployment is high, we don't need to spend that much. In other words, do we want to hire employed people or unemployed people? This may sound like a silly question, but it is indeed legitimate. Is there an advantage to hiring unemployed versus employed individuals? Well, it depends on who you talk to, but often managers prefer to hire people who already have jobs versus those who don't. At least they prefer to hire people who have had jobs or are just recently unemployed versus those who have been unemployed for an extensive period of time. This is a good topic for our discussion forum, but this gives you something to think about. It's better to be employed at something when searching for a job than unemployed. Part of being attractive to prospective employers is being employed. However, we may want to steal good employees from other companies. If so, we must take a different tact than merely advertising. We have to find a way to convince contented employees to leave their current company to come work for us. Obviously, this is much easier if we have a strong brand, but can be accomplished in any event. Another obvious consideration is the potential of hiring internally or promotions. Now, I'll leave that consideration for another later discussion, and for this example, we will assume no internal candidates are available. So what are our options in terms of location or where to look? The text lists these options in the previous chapter on sourcing, and I refer you back to that material. Of course, none of these options are standalone, and serious recruiting calls for the use of a combination of options. The final choice of recruitment methods rests on the current situation and the urgency of filling the opening. Use of executive search firms or headhunters represents a source that I have used extensively and with great success. This method, like others, has advantages and disadvantages, but also enjoys much popularity in business recruiting circles. I'll spend a little more time on this topic, delving into the practical side, because you often don't find frank discussions about headhunter behavior, both good and bad. This practical discussion certainly helps you navigate employment in headhunter territory as an employer searching for viable candidates, but it also helps you understand how this tool works so you can better utilize it as a job seeker. I mentioned earlier that we must consider hiring unemployed people or hiring those already employed. Both can be reached with the traditional recruiting methods because both groups are presumably seeking other job opportunities. In other words, they are looking. But what about recruiting a person who is employed but contented with their current employer and they're not looking? Isn't there some advantage to hiring contented people versus those non-contented? But how do we get to those people who are not looking for other opportunities? One good way to tap into that rich market is to use external search firms, or affectionately known as headhunters. The text points out that headhunters work in a higher ranges of management employees, and that's true to some extent. But typically, they work with first-level management and above, some new college grads and high-tech people, all the way to the top executives, and they work with both employed and unemployed individuals. How do headhunters reach employed, satisfied prospective candidates? Well, they do so through simple networking, continuous, extensive, and aggressive networking. Let's take a trip through a typical headhunter search and see how they operate and how they gain and utilize specific contacts. Of course, this is a general discussion, and I'm sure some search firms operate differently, but this is typical in my experience. I'll play the role of a headhunter, and you play the role of employer searching for a viable position. Let's go through the typical scenario and define your role as an employer and my role as a headhunter. My search firm, Willie's Recruiting Company, is built on the premise that I can fill your job openings, particularly those difficult openings, with exceptional, not just acceptable people. You may have found me on the internet or by referral, or I may have placed you in this current position. We begin our relationship with a meeting in which you share with me the particulars about the job, your company, and your expectations. We also discuss the history of your company and its anticipated future. You share anything that will help market your company to prospective candidates and improve your brand. Remember, many of the individuals may not actually be aware that they want to change jobs. I, as a headhunter, must convince them to consider your opportunity. We discuss my fee, which may be 30 to 35% of the new hire's first year compensation, or we may negotiate a smaller rate. I would probably be willing to accept a smaller rate if you, as an employer, are willing to give me exclusive rights to fill the position. In other words, no other employment agency is allowed to provide candidates. There are other potential financial agreements that may be acceptable, but in any event, we establish a fee structure. Now, you may also want to keep this job search strictly confidential. In other words, our company name will not be attached in any way to the recruiting activities. Now, why would we want to keep a job opening confidential or secret? There are several reasons you may not want the identity of your company divulged. First, an open position may have a person in that position currently. It may be someone, for whatever reason, is unsatisfactory and not performing well. Said in a different way, there is a firing in the future. You don't want the identity of your company known for obvious reasons. The second reason is that the position may not be occupied, but the company has, for some reason, decided to make the position available internally. This is a reason for which I disagree, but still happens. Therefore, you don't want to make anyone mad until after you secretly hire a person from the outside. Doesn't make much sense, does it? Another reason that is very valid relates to the position's perceived importance to the company, to the outside world. Let's assume the opening is for a VP of sales. You may not want your competitors to know that you are operating without a VP of sales. Likewise, often when managers or executives retire, we may not want our competition to know of the impending retirement until after a qualified replacement is in place. Confidentiality is not required, but an option, and is certainly an option worthy of consideration. I, as a headhunter, will likely also request a meeting with the hiring manager and others in the organization involved with the job or the job search process. These meetings will give me a feel for the work environment, the job, and your company. Remember, I'm now a salesman for your company to prospective candidates, some of which may not understand how badly they want your open position. It also provides me, the headhunter, with another benefit, which I'll discuss in a moment. Keep in mind that during these meetings, you and others may be releasing confidential information to me about your company, the job, and the future of the organization. You release this information to me so I can represent your company on the open market to the public and potential candidates. Care must be taken as to what information is released and how that information is disseminated by the outside third party. You must also make sure I understand what commitments I can make to prospective candidates about pay, benefits, vacations, reporting structure, etc. After our meeting, I go back to my office, compile all this information, and consult my database, and from that database identify individuals who meet the qualifications of the open position. But where does this database come from? This database will yield names of individuals with whom I have worked and placed in jobs in the past, or through the contacts I made during the meetings I mentioned previously. This is an additional benefit of the meetings with hiring managers and others I spoke of as a headhunter. I am always obtaining contacts. I am always networking. I basically contact these individuals from my database and explain that I have an opening for a position in which they are well qualified and would like to put them in touch with the HR department for hiring manager of the company. I may, through my contacts, even know the salary and benefits of the potential candidate. I basically sell the prospective company to the contact and try to convince them that they should consider this new opportunity based on their previous relationship and their desire to improve their career position. If interest is expressed, I help the prospective candidate with a resume and offer that resume for review by you, the hiring manager. If I, as a headhunter, don't have personal contact with the qualifications, I probably know of a person in a company with which I've worked in the past who does have those qualifications. In other words, I may not know a candidate personally, but I know of their position and their name. Remember that I probably obtained your organizational structure, so I have many organization structures in my database with names. I may elect to cold call that individual and inquire about their interest in moving. I may open my call like this. We haven't met, but my name is Willie Wooldridge, and I'm with Willie's Recruiting Company. I have a job opening for which I believe you are qualified. The company is a great organization that offers good salary, great benefits, and a wonderful working environment full of opportunity. Would you be interested in talking to me or meeting with me so I can explain this opportunity? Now, it's very flattering to be contacted and very difficult to turn down such a meeting or inquiry. If it works out, I will assist in a resume and present it to the hiring manager. If it doesn't work out, I have a new contact for future placement and networking. If neither of those fishing holes yield an acceptable number of candidates, I will call my HR friends and other high-level management and executive contacts in unrelated fields and simply ask, I have an opening for blank I'm trying to fill. Do you know of anyone in this field with these qualifications? It could be a friend, a neighbor, someone from a competitor, someone who used to work for your company, or any other source. I would appreciate the help, and it will provide someone with a great opportunity. I, as a headhunter, don't expect you to give up your own people, but who wouldn't jump at the opportunity to help a relative, friend, or a previous coworker? This is a type of fishing an HR professional can't do. HR professionals have many other responsibilities and simply can't take the time to build the extensive network. An effective network includes cold call prospective candidates, referral sources, people interested in changing jobs and companies, including information and organization charts. Headhunters serve a very useful, although very expensive role. They readily tap into the already employed candidate pool. As a part of their marketing campaign, headhunters regularly monitor company websites and job boards looking for open positions which they can provide assistance. They are aggressive marketers, and they are aggressive marketers for their candidates, the companies they represent, and for themselves. After presenting a list of qualified candidates to you, the HR hiring manager, most headhunters help coordinate interviews. They facilitate communication between the candidates and prospective hiring company, and they effectively market the candidate to the company and the company to the candidate. Remember, the primary goal of a headhunter is to fill a job and gain a commission. Also understand that you are not restricted to using one headhunter. You can use multiple search firms to fill the same position. This certainly expands your reach into the marketplace, but other complications also must be managed. Once you sign a contract with a search firm, and they require you to sign a contract, you are obligated to pay the agreed upon fee if the headhunter offers a candidate that is ultimately hired. Often prospective candidates work with multiple headhunters as well. Therefore, you may receive a resume from one candidate 2 or 3 times from different headhunters. You don't have to pay multiple fees. You must pay the headhunter who submitted the resume first. That said, you must be able to prove who submitted it first, or you may have to pay multiple fees. Use of multiple headhunters requires management on the part of HR. Now, I've worked with headhunters extensively in the past. I find that many managers are suspicious of headhunter motives and actions and are not particularly fond of that form of recruiting. However, I believe this is an unfair criticism. Headhunters provide a necessary service and do something HR doesn't have the time and the expertise to accomplish. It is true the primary motive for headhunters is to close the deal and earn a healthy commission. I'm sorry, but I have trouble finding fault with that basic motive. Making money is a common motive in business, thank God. It is true that headhunters are constantly marketing and collecting contacts for later placement. But it is difficult to criticize that action, particularly because that is why you are hiring them in the first place. There are other disadvantages of using headhunters, which I'll list in a moment, but the advantages are equally great. I also believe the disadvantages can be overcome if one manages the headhunters as you should manage anyone involved in the recruiting process. So let's review the advantages and disadvantages as I see them. The disadvantages. Headhunters and search firms are expensive, 25 to 35% of new hires' first salary or more. Headhunters are representing your company to the outside world and may have information that is confidential. Headhunters may inadvertently make promises or commitments that you are not prepared to honor when enticing candidates away from their current employee. For example, I'm sure they will honor your current 6-week vacation award in your new position. Headhunters will make contact with several managers and professionals and valued employees in your organization while fulfilling their recruitment obligations. Internal contacts may be used to lure your employees away to another company in the future. And it takes time to manage headhunters, particularly if you're using more than one to fill a position. The advantages: headhunters can tap into the already employed resources which are unavailable to most HR professionals. Headhunters have extensive contact lists and data banks with which to provide qualified candidates. Headhunters can provide extensive information on candidates beyond the resume through the personal contacts. Headhunters can save time by helping coordinate and recruiting and selection process, including scheduling interviews, conducting phone interviews, etc. Headhunters can devote more time to the particular search than HR professionals who are tasked with many other responsibilities. Headhunters will likely present a higher caliber candidate list than would be created by HR advertising and HR limited resources. And finally, headhunters are expensive unless you consider the potential long-term positive impact on the organization through a highly qualified applicant pool from which to choose. I guess you get what you pay for. As you can probably see, I'm a proponent of using search firms and headhunters for particular managerial, professional, and difficult-to-hire positions. In terms of an analogy, I like and trust my family doctor very much, analogous to the HR professional on site. But I don't expect or want them to do everything. I don't want my family doctor to perform surgery on any part of my body. They don't have time to garner the expertise or apply that expertise in a focused manner that will ensure my short-term and long-term survival. I want a specialized surgeon. By the same token, I don't want to go to a surgeon and pay their prices because I have a common cold. Think of the headhunter as a surgeon and the local HR professional as a family doctor. Both have their jobs, but it is unwise to expect either to effectively fulfill the other's roles. When recruiting positions with high impact on the organization, seek professional help. Seeking professional help is a sign of efficiency, leadership, and strength. We will talk more about seeking appropriate professional assistance in future sessions. And finally, another method is very simple and absolutely free. I call this method proactive recruiting. Recruit always. Look for talent everywhere and always. All management and executives should recruit constantly. If we wait until the need arises, we lose valuable time recruiting, assessing, selecting, hiring, and then it takes a new hire up to a year to become fully acclimated in the job. If I need a person now, can I afford to wait for over a year to get the full benefit of the hire? For critical positions, anticipate and recruit proactively. Always be on the lookout for highly qualified potential employees. Let me give you an example. I was introduced to such a person who was running a medium-sized business in our local community. Deborah was an impressive lady who had an engineering background, a master's degree, and was a Rhodes Scholar. I scheduled a lunch meeting with her to determine her interest in leaving her current employer, even though I had no current position open. She indicated that she would not want to leave immediately, but sometime down the road she may entertain a job change if the opportunity was right. I told her I was very interested in finding an appropriate position for her someday, and we would keep in touch. I returned to my organization and spoke to the owner, the CEO, and other high placed individuals and told them all that we must hire this person at some time in the future. I was convinced that she had the intellect and the qualifications to contribute significantly to our organization as an executive in an executive role. I arranged another luncheon meeting with Deborah and myself and the CEO. His comment to me upon leaving that meeting was, "I believe she is the smartest person I've ever met. I agree. We have to hire her at some point." We kept the dialogue going for over a year with periodic meetings and discussions. Finally, an executive opportunity came open, and we hired Deborah, and she lived up to our expectations. This example makes a couple of important points. I have known leaders who are forever vigilant, looking for talent. Talent does not always present itself at the time of a job opening exists. At times, we must find talent and then cultivate a relationship until the proper opportunity presents itself, much like headhunters do. Human resource management should cultivate a culture in which the search for talent, externally and internally, is continuous and not dependent upon unfulfilled structured jobs. Also, the example illustrates that some unconventional recruiting tactics are long-term activities. At this point, recruiting becomes strategic instead of tactical. People make the difference. People create success. Finding the right people depends on where we look and how we look. Search for good people in the wrong places, and you may find yourself considering a lot of people who are the best of a mediocre population. It's where you look. And if you're looking in the right places, but your company doesn't look particularly attractive, you will not be able to get their attention. It's how you look. Same goes for you as a job seeker. It's where you look and how you look, and both are totally within your control. I firmly believe that opportunities don't just arise, they are created.